My name is Ella, and for as long as I can remember, I've lived in my older brother Jake's shadow. I remember my 10th birthday clearly. Mom and Dad gave Jake a new gaming console for Christmas that year, but when my birthday rolled around 3 months later, I got a pack of colored pencils and a sketchbook. You like drawing, don't you? Mom said, while Dad nodded approvingly. Sure, I liked drawing, but what 10-year-old wouldn't prefer a gaming console? That was how things worked in our house. Jake got the newest iPhone, I inherited his old one. Jake got tennis lessons, I got to practice against the garage door. When we went out to eat, Jake chose the restaurant. When we planned vacations, they revolved around Jake's baseball tournament schedule. The only person who seemed to notice, or care, was Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister. She'd sweep into our house every few months like a breath of fresh air, always carrying 2 identical gift bags. I'll never forget the Christmas when Aunt Sarah bought us both new tablets. Mom and Dad were furious. Ella doesn't need such an expensive gift, Mom hissed in the kitchen. You're just making things difficult. Difficult how, Claire? Aunt Sarah's voice was sharp. By treating them equally? You know we can't afford to give them both things like that. Now she'll expect it. Maybe she should expect it, Aunt Sarah shot back. She's your daughter too. I learned to press my ear against doors early, to catch these conversations about me that never included me. I learned to smile and say thank you for hand-me-downs, to pretend I didn't mind when Jake got to choose the movie every single time, to act like it was perfectly normal that his academic achievements were celebrated with parties while mine earned a pat on the head. Don't let it get to you, sweetie, Aunt Sarah would whisper when she hugged me goodbye after her visits. You're worth just as much as he is. I believed her, mostly. But it's hard to feel equal when everything around you screams that you're not. Even my parents' photo wall told the story, dozens of pictures of Jake's baseball games, school plays, and award ceremonies, with only a handful of my school photos scattered between them. The pattern continued through middle school and into high school. Jake was the star athlete, the popular kid, the one whose future our parents discussed endlessly at dinner. I was just Ella. The quiet one. The responsible one. The one who learned to expect less because it hurt less that way. But everything changed when our grandfather passed away during my senior year. When his lawyer called us all together after the funeral, I expected the usual, maybe some family heirlooms, a few cherished photos. What none of us expected was the education trust fund he had set up years ago. 2 separate accounts, one for Jake and one for me, each containing enough money for a full college education. The funds can only be used for educational purposes, the lawyer explained, adjusting his glasses as he read from the document. Tuition, books, and necessary living expenses while attending an accredited institution. I'll never forget the look on Mom's face, a mixture of surprise and something else. Disappointment? Frustration? Dad just sat there, tapping his fingers against the armrest of his chair. But what if the kids need the money for something else? Mom asked. Surely there's some flexibility. I'm afraid not, Mrs. Mitchell. Your father was very specific about the terms. Later that night, I overheard them talking in their bedroom. It's ridiculous, Mom was saying. Jake could use that money to start his business. But no, it has to be for college. They both got the same amount, Dad replied. Though Jake's business idea. I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew then that if Grandpa hadn't specified the money was for education only, my portion would have somehow found its way to Jake's business venture. I chose a college in Colorado, as far from home as my trust fund would comfortably allow. For years of freedom, of being judged on my own merits rather than in comparison to Jake. I thrived there, made the dean's list every semester, and graduated with honors in marketing. Coming back home wasn't my first choice, but the job market was tough, and a position at Johnson & Associates Marketing seemed like a good starting point. That's where I met Chris at the company Christmas party. He was from the graphic design department, with kind eyes and a laugh that made everyone around him smile. Want to grab a coffee sometime? He asked as we shared the last of the office party cookies. One coffee date turned into dinner, dinner turned into weekend trips, and before I knew it, we were talking about moving in together. Mom and Dad actually seemed pleased when I brought Chris home to meet them. We were discussing our plans to rent an apartment together when Mom suddenly perked up. "You know," she said, setting down her coffee cup, "we have that apartment downtown, the one Dad left me. The current tenants are moving out next month." "Really?" Chris asked, interested. "The rent would be less than market rate," Mom continued. "And it would be nice to have family taking care of the property." Chris squeezed my hand under the table. The apartment was in a great location, and the reduced rent would help us save for the wedding. "What do you think, Ella?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment, remembering all the times family arrangements had worked against me. But this felt different. This was about my future, about building something new with Chris. "Let's do it," I said, and his smile made any lingering doubts fade away. We signed the lease the following week, and as we moved our boxes into what would become our first home together, I felt like I was finally stepping into the life I'd always wanted. Life in Grandpa's old apartment felt like living in a dream. Chris and I settled into a comfortable routine, making the space our own with mismatched furniture. Meeting his parents, David and Linda, was a highlight. They welcomed me with open arms from the very first dinner. "You're exactly what we hoped Chris would find," Linda told me one evening while we were cleaning up after Sunday dinner. "Someone kind, smart, and grounded." Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. Then one morning, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, our future shifted into even sharper focus. "Chris?" My voice shook as I called him into the bathroom. "I need to show you something." He stared at the test, then broke into a huge grin. "We're having a baby?" When I nodded, he picked me up and spun me around, careful not to squeeze too tight. "This is perfect. We need to move up the wedding. I want our baby to have married parents from day one." Telling my parents was nerve-wracking, but even they seemed to come around quickly. "Pregnant?" Mom's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "But you're not married yet." "We're planning the wedding in the coming months," I rushed to explain. "Chris is already looking at venues." Dad's frown slowly transformed into a reluctant smile. "Well, at least you're doing things in the right order, mostly. And Chris is a responsible young man." The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding planning and doctor's appointments. We decided on a small ceremony, nothing too elaborate. My growing belly became our little secret joy, and every kick felt like a promise of our future together. Then came that Tuesday evening when I was 6 months along. I just finished setting up the nursery corner in our bedroom. We'd painted it soft yellow that weekend. Chris came home later than usual, and something was off in his expression. "I need to pack some things," he said, not meeting my eyes as he pulled out his suitcase from the closet. "Pack? Are you going on a business trip?" I asked, watching as he started throwing clothes haphazardly into the case. "No, Ella. I'm leaving." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Leaving? What do you mean, leaving?" He finally looked at me, and his face was completely void of the warmth I'd grown to love. "I met someone else. Her name is Rebecca. I love her." "You love her?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. "But we're having a baby. We're getting married." "I'm sorry, Ella. I thought I loved you, but with Rebecca, it's different. It's real." He zipped up the suitcase. "I can't marry you just because you're pregnant. That wouldn't be fair to anyone." "Fair?" My voice cracked. "You're leaving me when I'm 6 months pregnant, and you want to talk about what's fair?" But he was already heading for the door, suitcase in hand. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about child support arrangements." And just like that, he was gone. I stood in our half-furnished nursery, my hand on my swollen belly, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. The baby kicked, as if sensing my distress, and I realized I was completely alone. With trembling fingers, I dialed my parents' number. The phone rang 3 times before Mom picked up. Through tears, I explained what had happened, how Chris had packed his bags, how he'd found someone else, how he'd just walked out. "Oh dear," Mom said, her voice oddly flat. Will you be able to keep paying the rent on the apartment? The question hit me like a slap. Not, are you okay? Not, do you need anything? But whether I could keep paying rent on their property. Yes, I'm still working, I managed to say. I have enough for rent. Good, good, Mom replied, sounding relieved. You know we need that rental income. I threw myself into work after that, trying to keep my mind off the emptiness of the apartment and the wedding savings Chris had taken with him. Every morning, I'd check my depleting bank account and calculate how many months I could survive on what was left. The baby's kicks became my constant companion, reminding me that I couldn't afford to fall apart. But at 8 months, everything changed. The morning sickness that had eased in my second trimester came back with a vengeance. Not just in the mornings anymore, it was all day, every day. During client meetings, I'd have to excuse myself multiple times to throw up. My ankles swelled so badly I could barely walk, and the migraines made looking at computer screens torture. After nearly fainting during a presentation, my doctor ordered me to take it easy. Your blood pressure is concerning, she said firmly. You need to reduce stress and rest. With no other choice, I took unpaid leave from work. My hands were shaking again as I called my parents to let them know. I had to take some time off, I explained. The pregnancy's gotten really complicated. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, how long will you be off work? The doctor says at least until after the baby comes. More silence. We'll come by tomorrow to discuss this, Dad finally said. They arrived the next morning, Mom clutching her purse like a shield, Dad with that stern expression I remembered from childhood disappointments. We've been thinking, Mom began, perching on the edge of the couch. With you not working, we can't afford to have this apartment sitting here not generating proper income. We have expenses to consider. I stared at them, one hand protectively over my belly. What are you saying? We're saying you need to find somewhere else to live, Mom said briskly. We've already found new tenants who can pay the full market rate. They'll be moving in next week. Next week? My voice came out as a whisper. But I'm 8 months pregnant. Which is precisely why we can't have you staying here without being able to pay, Dad replied. You need to pack your things and leave today. I stood in the middle of what had been my home, surrounded by half-packed boxes, trying to process what was happening. My own parents were evicting me, their pregnant daughter, because I couldn't pay rent for a few months. The same parents who had given Jake endless second chances, who had supported his every venture, were throwing me out when I needed them most. We'll help you pack, Mom said, already opening my closet. These boxes should fit in your car. Don't forget to leave the keys on the counter, Dad added, checking his phone. The new tenants want to measure for curtains this afternoon. My hands shook as I folded my clothes, packed away the baby items I'd carefully collected, and dismantled the nursery I'd never get to use. With each item I packed, the reality of my situation became clearer. I was about to be homeless at 8 months pregnant. Once my car was loaded, I sat behind the wheel, watching my parents immediately make calls to the new tenants. They didn't even wave goodbye. Desperate, I called Jake. I need help, I said when he answered, explaining the situation through tears. Could I stay with you for a while? Just until I figure something out? Are you kidding? Jake scoffed. I've got roommates, Ella. I can't have a pregnant woman crashing here. Besides, if Mom and Dad kicked you out, you must have really messed up. After hanging up, I sat in my packed car, one hand on my belly, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Then I remembered Aunt Sarah, the one person who had always treated me like I mattered. Aunt Sarah? My voice cracked when she answered. Ella? Sweetheart, what's wrong? I told her everything, Chris leaving, the pregnancy complications, my parents evicting me, Jake refusing to help. Before I could even ask, she cut me off. Get in your car right now and drive to my house. I'm making up the guest room as we speak. 2 hours later, I was wrapped in my aunt's arms on her front porch, sobbing into her shoulder. Those heartless. She muttered, then took a deep breath. Never mind them. You're home now, sweetheart. You and this baby are home. She helped me unpack, transforming her guest room into a cozy haven. She set up the crib I'd brought, arranged the baby clothes in the dresser, and hung cheerful curtains. See, she said, stepping back to admire our work. Everything has its place, including you. In the days that followed, Aunt Sarah's house became the sanctuary I desperately needed. Despite my protests, she insisted I rest while she cooked and cleaned. When the morning sickness hit, she held my hair back and brought me ginger tea. She talked to my belly, telling my baby stories about when I was little, making me laugh for the first time in weeks. The contractions started at midnight. Aunt Sarah was by my side instantly, timing them and keeping me calm. When we drove to the hospital at dawn, she held my hand through every red light and speed bump. 14 hours of labor, and she never left my side. She wiped my forehead, fed me ice chips, and advocated with the nurses when I was too exhausted to speak. When my son finally arrived, crying and perfect, Aunt Sarah was the one who cut the cord. My parents didn't call, didn't text. Didn't even know their grandson had been born. I wanted to keep it that way, at least for now. Please don't tell anyone, I begged Aunt Sarah as we settled into life with baby Noah. Not even the family. Especially not Mom and Dad. It's your story to tell, sweetheart, she assured me. Your son, your rules. We fell into a peaceful routine. Noah was an easy baby, sleeping well and nursing like a champ. Our quiet bubble felt safe, protected from the outside world's judgment and pain. Then, 2 months after Noah's birth, my phone rang. Linda's name flashed on the screen, Chris's mom. My heart stopped. Ella, her voice was thick with emotion. Could we meet? David and I need to see you. Something in her tone made me say yes. They arrived at Aunt Sarah's house an hour later, and the moment I opened the door, they both embraced me. We are so sorry, Linda sobbed. We just found out what Chris did. David looked furious and heartbroken at the same time. He never told us you'd broken up. Every time we asked about the wedding or the baby, he'd change the subject. We knew something was wrong, but... Finally, we confronted him, Linda continued. We realized by the timing that you must have had the baby by now. When we pressed him, he admitted everything, leaving you, the other woman, all of it. We came as soon as we knew, David added. Is our grandchild. I led them to where Noah was sleeping in his bassinet. They stood over him, tears flowing freely. He's perfect, Linda whispered. We want to help, David said firmly, pulling out an envelope. This is for immediate expenses, $10,000. And this. He held up a set of keys. This is to our rental property on Oak Street. It's yours, rent-free, for as long as you need it. We'll also be setting up a monthly support payment, Linda added. Regardless of what our son does, this baby is our grandson, and you're the mother of our grandson. We take care of family. I burst into tears, overwhelmed by their kindness. These people who had no biological connection to me, who could have easily sided with their son, were offering more support than my own flesh and blood. The move to Oak Street happened quickly. Aunt Sarah organized everything while I focused on Noah, and within a day, we were settled into a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment with a nursery that was twice the size of my old one. The next few months were peaceful. Noah grew stronger every day, his smile lighting up my world. Linda and David visited weekly, always bringing supplies and staying to help. Aunt Sarah came by almost daily, proud in her role as honorary grandmother. Then, 6 months after Noah's birth, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Mom. Ella? Her voice was sugary sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. We heard the most wonderful news from Margaret at church. Why didn't you tell us we had a grandson? We're his grandparents. We have a right to see him. A right? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like I had a right to shelter when I was 8 months pregnant and sick? Oh, honey, you're not still upset about that, are you? Mom's voice took on that dismissive tone I knew so well. We had to protect our investment. You understand business. Business? My voice cracked. I was your daughter, carrying your grandchild. Dad's voice cut in, they were on speakerphone. Now listen here, young lady. You're being vindictive. We are that boy's grandparents, and you owe us access to him. I owe you? The words came out as a whisper. I owed you rent when I was sick and pregnant, and when I couldn't pay, you threw me out. That's what I owed you, remember? You're twisting things, Mom snapped. We simply needed reliable tenants. I hung up. My hands were shaking as I opened Facebook. For months, I'd stayed quiet about everything, the eviction, the abandonment, all of it. But their audacity, their attempt to rewrite history, broke something in me. I started typing. Last year, when I was 8 months pregnant, sick with complications, and recently abandoned by my fiancé, my parents evicted me from their rental property because I needed to take unpaid medical leave. They didn't ask if I had somewhere to go. They didn't offer help. They didn't even ask if I was okay. Their only concern was getting reliable tenants who could pay full market rate. I told everything. How they'd chosen money over their daughter and unborn grandchild. How my brother had refused to help. How Aunt Sarah had saved me. How Chris's parents, who had no obligation to me, had shown more compassion than my own family. The post went viral within our community within hours. Friends shared it, colleagues shared it, church members shared it. Comments flooded in. I can't believe they did this to their own daughter. What kind of grandparents care more about rent than their pregnant daughter? This explains why they stopped coming to church events. Mom and Dad tried damage control in the comments, Ella is exaggerating. We offered help, she refused. She's always been dramatic. Then Aunt Sarah weighed in with her own detailed account, including dates, times, and exact quotes. She posted photos of the day they'd evicted me, my car packed with everything I owned, my obviously pregnant form struggling with boxes. I witnessed my sister and brother-in-law choose money over their daughter's well-being, she wrote. I watched them evict her when she was vulnerable and sick. Everything Ella has said is true, and I have documentation to prove it. The community's response was swift and unanimous. People who'd known my parents for decades expressed their disgust. Their carefully cultivated image of devoted parents and grandparents crumbled in real time, one angry comment after another. A year has passed since that Facebook post. Noah is walking now, toddling around our beautiful apartment with the confidence of a child who knows he's deeply loved. Not by everyone, but by the right people. My parents still try sometimes. Christmas cards. Birthday messages. Voicemails about family healing and moving forward. Last month, they even sent a lawyer's letter about grandparents' rights. I handed it straight to David, who happens to be a retired attorney himself. Don't worry, he said, reading it with a bemused smile. They don't have a case. Not after what they did. Every Sunday, we have dinner at Linda and David's house. They've turned the spare room into a nursery for Noah's overnight stays, decorated with stars and moons because he loves anything that glows. Aunt Sarah comes over almost every evening after I get home from work. The nanny Linda hired is wonderful, a retired preschool teacher who reads to Noah for hours, but Aunt Sarah still likes to give him his bedtime bottle. You know, she told me recently, I always wished I'd had children of my own. Now I have you and Noah. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, just not in the way you expected. Work has been amazing. When I was ready to return, my boss created a flexible schedule that lets me work from home 2 days a week. My colleagues, who'd seen everything unfold on social media, welcomed me back with open arms and endless support. Chris tried to contact me once, after his parents told him they were helping us. I made a mistake, he texted. Maybe we could try again? I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Sometimes, when I'm rocking Noah to sleep in his room overlooking the garden Linda planted for him, I think about how life takes unexpected turns. A year and a half ago, I thought I was lost, pregnant, abandoned, evicted, and alone. I thought losing my parents' love was the end of my world. Instead, it was just the beginning. I look at my son, at his perfect little face so peaceful in sleep, and I know I'll never let him feel second best. He'll grow up surrounded by people who love him unconditionally, his grandparents Linda and David, his beloved Aunt Sarah, and me. Yes, some people in town still whisper about what happened. They stop talking when I walk into the coffee shop, or they give me sympathetic looks at the grocery store. But I don't mind anymore. The truth set me free in ways I never expected. My family may be smaller now, but it's real. It's built on love, not obligation. On choice, not blood. On actions, not empty words. Noah stirs in his sleep, his tiny hand clutching my finger. Outside, I can hear Aunt Sarah in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's lunches. My phone buzzes with a text from Linda about this weekend's barbecue. This is my family now. This is my happy ending. Or maybe it's just the beginning.